Tanks thundered closer, trapping Bravo 5 in a deadly vice. Desperate, the colonel demanded any jet for a rescue, never expecting salvation from a lone A-10 piloted by a woman he'd nearly forgotten. In the chaos of war, legends are born where rules are broken, and sometimes the old warhorse is exactly what victory demands. The thunderous rumble of enemy armor rolled across the barren landscape like an approaching storm. Through the haze of smoke and dust, the silhouettes of T-72 tanks emerged from the ridgeline, their barrels sweeping methodically as they advanced toward the trapped American position. In the cramped command bunker 15 miles away, the urgency was palpable, radio chatter crackling with desperation, officers hunched over glowing screens, and the weight of lives hanging in the balance. Colonel Thomas Rourke stood rigid behind the main tactical display, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the metal table. At 53, he'd seen enough combat to know when a situation was spiraling beyond control. The red markers on his screen told the story: Bravo 5 squad, 12 soldiers strong, pinned down in a valley with nowhere to run and enemy armor closing fast. Bravo 5 to base, we've got multiple tanks moving on our position. The voice of Sergeant David Tex Alvarez cut through the static, professional despite the circumstances. Request immediate air support. We're running low on anti-tank rounds and they're getting closer. Lieutenant Jamie Wu looked up from her communications console, her young face tense with concern. Colonel, I've got Bravo 5's coordinates locked. They're in a bad spot, surrounded on 3 sides with a cliff face behind them. Those tanks will have them zeroed in within minutes. Rourke's jaw tightened as he studied the tactical situation. 12 good soldiers about to be overrun because of faulty intelligence that hadn't accounted for enemy armor in the sector. Get me air support, Lieutenant. Now. Wu's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up the air asset board. Her expression fell as she read the displays. Sir, we've got problems. The F-16 squadron is 40 minutes out, still refueling after their last sortie. The F-35s are grounded for maintenance, won't be flight ready for at least an hour. An hour? Rourke's voice carried the edge of a man watching time slip away. Those boys don't have an hour. They don't have 10 minutes. Another transmission crackled from Bravo 5's position. This time it was Private Ethan Morgan, barely 20 years old, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Base, we can see the lead tank through the smoke. Maybe 800 meters in closing. Please tell me help is coming. Wu hesitated, her eyes scanning the remaining entries on her screen. Colonel, there's one aircraft available, but it's not what you're looking for. I don't care if it's a crop duster at this point. What do we have? It's an A-10, sir. Call sign Valkyrie. Major Alice Walker. She's been conducting training exercises about 20 clicks north of Bravo 5's position. Wu paused, knowing the colonel's opinion on the aging aircraft. But sir, the Warthog is, well, it's hardly what you'd call modern air support. Rourke's expression darkened. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, a relic from the Cold War era, slow, ungainly, built around a massive cannon that belonged in a museum rather than modern warfare. In an age of stealth fighters and precision missiles, the Warthog seemed as outdated as a cavalry charge. That flying tank? He shook his head. I need jets, Lieutenant. Fast movers that can get in there and neutralize those tanks before Bravo 5 gets slaughtered. Sir, with respect, Valkyrie is the only asset we have in range. Those F-16s won't make it in time, and... The radio interrupted with Sergeant Alvarez's voice, strained but steady. Any station, this is Bravo 5. Enemy armor is 500 meters in closing. We need air support now, or we're not going home. Rourke stared at the tactical display, watching the red enemy markers creep closer to Bravo 5's position. Modern warfare demanded modern solutions, precision strikes from advanced aircraft, not some antiquated ground attack plane that had seen its best days decades ago. But as the seconds ticked by and no other options appeared on Lieutenant Wu's screen, a cold realization settled over the command bunker: sometimes you don't get the war you prepared for. The decision hung in the air like smoke from the distant battlefield. Colonel Rourke's weathered fingers drummed against the tactical table as he weighed impossible choices: send an outdated aircraft into harm's way, or watch 12 soldiers face overwhelming odds with no support at all. The mathematics of war had never been crueler. "Sir," Lieutenant Wu said quietly, her voice cutting through the tension, "Major Walker is monitoring emergency frequencies. If we put out the call..." Before Rourke could respond, a sharp beep echoed from the radar console across the room. Specialist Rodriguez, barely 22 and still learning the intricacies of air traffic control, looked up with confusion written across his face. "Colonel, I've got an aircraft on approach vector toward Bravo 5's position. No flight plan filed, no radio contact." Wu spun in her chair, pulling up the radar feed on her secondary monitor. The distinctive signature appeared on screen, low, slow, and unmistakably an A-10 Thunderbolt II. "Sir, that's Valkyrie. She's already airborne and heading toward the engagement zone." "What?" Rourke strode to the radar display, his eyes narrowing as he tracked the aircraft's path. "I didn't authorize any takeoff. Get her on the radio immediately." Wu switched to the emergency frequency, her voice professional but urgent. Valkyrie, this is base control. You are not cleared for this mission. Please respond and state your intentions." Static filled the speakers. Nothing but the empty hiss of radio silence. "Valkyrie, this is base control. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Acknowledge this transmission." Still nothing. The A-10's radar signature continued its steady approach toward the combat zone, ignoring all attempts at communication. Rourke grabbed the microphone himself, his voice carrying the full weight of command authority. "Major Walker, this is Colonel Rourke. You are flying without authorization into an active combat zone. Return to base immediately. That is a direct order." The radio remained silent, but through the static, they could hear the distant sound of Bravo 5's increasingly desperate communications. Sergeant Alvarez's voice crackled through, "Base, enemy tanks are 300 meters out. We're taking small arms fire. Where's that air support?" 20 miles away, Major Alice Walker sat in the cramped cockpit of her A-10, her hands steady on the controls as she guided the aircraft through the smoke-filled sky. The radio chatter from base command buzzed in her headset, but her attention was focused entirely on the coordinates burning bright on her navigation display, the position where 12 American soldiers were fighting for their lives. She'd heard the distress calls while conducting routine training exercises. Protocol demanded she wait for official authorization, follow proper channels, let command sort through the paperwork while good people died waiting for bureaucracy to catch up with reality. But Alice Walker had learned long ago that sometimes protocol was a luxury that soldiers on the ground couldn't afford. The Warthog responded to her touch like an old friend, its twin engines providing the steady, reliable power that had carried her through countless missions. Unlike the sleek fighters that dominated modern air forces, the A-10 wasn't built for speed or grace, it was built to survive, to deliver devastating firepower exactly where it was needed, and to bring its pilot home no matter what hell waited below. Through her canopy, she could see the smoke columns rising from Bravo 5's position. Enemy muzzle flashes flickered in the distance like deadly fireflies. Her targeting systems were already calculating range and bearing, the familiar weight of the GAU-8 cannon's ammunition drum a comforting presence beneath her feet. Back in the command bunker, the tension was reaching a breaking point. Rourke watched the radar screen with growing frustration as the unauthorized aircraft continued its approach. How the hell did she take off without clearance? Where was ground control? Wu checked her logs, her face pale. "Sir, according to the tower, Major Walker filed a routine training flight plan an hour ago. She was cleared for exercises in Sector 7, but that was 15 kilometers from here. She must have changed course when she heard Bravo 5's distress call." "Changed course without authorization," Rourke muttered, torn between admiration for the pilot's initiative and anger at her blatant disregard for command structure. "Does she have any idea what she's flying into? Those tanks have anti-aircraft systems. One lucky shot and we'll have lost our unauthorized rescue attempt and a damn good pilot." The radar operator called out, "Sir, Valkyrie is 2 minutes from the engagement zone. Altitude 300 feet, she's flying nap of the Earth, using terrain masking." Wu looked up from her console with something approaching awe. "Colonel, she's approaching from the southwest, using the ridgeline for cover." That's actually brilliant. The enemy won't see her coming until she's right on top of them." For the first time since the crisis began, Colonel Rourke felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, that old flying tank might give Bravo 5 the miracle they desperately needed. The silence that preceded the storm was deceptive. For a heartbeat, the battlefield seemed frozen in time, enemy tanks grinding forward through the dust, Bravo 5 hunkered down behind inadequate cover, and somewhere above the chaos, an aging A-10 Thunderbolt II descended like a mechanical angel of death. Major Alice Walker's eyes swept the terrain below, her trained gaze cataloging targets with the cold precision of a surgeon preparing for a life-saving operation. "Contact," she whispered into her radio, finally breaking her silence. Not to base command, but directly to the soldiers who needed her most. "Bravo 5, this is Valkyrie. I have eyes on 3 enemy tanks advancing on your position. Keep your heads down, things are about to get loud." Sergeant Alvarez's voice crackled back, filled with relief and disbelief. "Valkyrie, this is Bravo 5 actual. We have you on visual. God, we're glad to see you. Lead tank is at 250 meters and closing fast." Alice banked her aircraft hard to the right, using a rocky outcropping to mask her approach. The A-10 wasn't built for stealth, but 30 years of flying close air support had taught her that surprise was often more valuable than speed. The enemy tank commanders were focused on their ground targets, expecting any air threat to come from high altitude with the scream of jet engines. They weren't prepared for a low, slow attack from an aircraft that sounded more like a flying locomotive than a fighter jet. Her targeting computer painted the lead T-72 tank in harsh green light. Range, 400 meters. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon beneath her feet contained 1,350 rounds of 30mm depleted uranium ammunition, each round capable of punching through the heaviest armor ever built. But Alice Walker didn't believe in overkill. Every shot had to count, every round had to find its mark. 12 soldiers were depending on her precision. The first burst was clinical in its efficiency. The distinctive BRRRT sound of the GAU-8 echoed across the valley as 60 rounds per second tore through the air. The depleted uranium projectiles struck the lead tank's turret with devastating effect, punching through steel plating like it was paper. The T-72 shuddered, smoke pouring from its hatches as secondary explosions rippled through its ammunition storage. "Holy shit!" Private Morgan's voice burst over the radio, his earlier panic replaced by amazement. "She got him. Direct hit on the lead tank." But Alice was already adjusting her attack angle, her aircraft pulling into a climbing turn that would position her for a second pass. The remaining 2 tanks had reacted to their comrades' destruction, their commanders finally realizing the threat came from above. Anti-aircraft machine guns swiveled skyward, tracers beginning to streak past her cockpit like deadly fireworks. In the command bunker, Colonel Rourke and his staff watched in stunned silence as the engagement unfolded on their screens. The radar showed Valkyrie's tight turning circle, her altitude never rising above 500 feet as she maneuvered for another attack run. Lieutenant Wu had patched into the gun camera feed, giving them a pilot's eye view of the destruction below. "Look at that precision," Wu breathed, her voice filled with professional admiration. "She's using minimum ammunition for maximum effect. That first burst couldn't have been more than 40 rounds. The second tank tried to retreat, its driver reversing frantically as the A-10 lined up for another pass. But the Warthog had already committed to its attack vector. Alice's finger found the trigger again, and another controlled burst sent depleted uranium rounds screaming earthward. This time the tank's engine compartment erupted in flames, orange and black smoke billowing as fuel and hydraulic fluid ignited. "Two down," Alice's voice came over the radio, calm and professional despite the tracer fire now filling the air around her aircraft. "One more customer to serve." The third tank commander, perhaps braver or more desperate than his comrades, decided to make a stand. The T-72's main gun swiveled upward, its 125mm cannon tracking the circling A-10. It was a desperate gambit. Hitting a maneuvering aircraft with a tank's main gun was nearly impossible, but desperation often bred dangerous creativity. Alice saw the threat immediately. Her aircraft jinked hard left just as the tank's cannon fired, the massive shell whistling past her wing close enough to rattle her teeth. But the evasive maneuver had cost her position. She was now approaching from a steeper angle, her targeting solution compromised. From their covered position, Corporal Samantha Brooks provided what help she could. "Valkyrie, remaining tank is moving to your 10 o'clock, trying to get hull down behind that burned-out truck." The third pass was the most dangerous yet. Alice had to dive steeper, exposing herself to ground fire for longer as she lined up her shot. The tank's anti-aircraft gun chattered continuously, filling the air with tracers. One round sparked off her armored cockpit, another punched a hole through her left wing. But the A-10 was built to absorb punishment and keep flying. Her final burst was the shortest, just 20 rounds, but it was perfectly placed. The depleted uranium penetrators struck the tank's turret ring, the weakest point in its armor. The T-72 stopped moving as if it had struck an invisible wall, then slowly began to burn from the inside out. "3 for 3, Alice announced, her voice betraying no emotion despite having just executed one of the most precise close air support missions in recent memory. "Bravo 5, your dance partners have left the party. You're clear to move to extraction." In the sudden quiet that followed, with only the crackle of burning metal and the whisper of wind across the battlefield, Sergeant Alvarez's voice carried a weight of gratitude that no amount of military protocol could diminish. "Valkyrie, this is Bravo 5. You just saved 12 lives with that run. We won't forget it." Neither would the officers watching from the command bunker, their preconceptions about obsolete aircraft shattered as thoroughly as the enemy armor burning in the valley below. The silence that settled over the command bunker was profound, broken only by the steady hum of electronics and the distant crackle of radio static. Colonel Rourke stood motionless before the tactical display, his eyes fixed on the 3 burning red markers that moments before had represented an unstoppable threat to Bravo 5. Now they were simply smoldering wrecks scattered across a valley floor, testament to a level of precision that defied everything he thought he knew about modern air warfare. Lieutenant Wu was the first to break the spell, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, I'm reading 3 confirmed kills. All enemy armor neutralized. Bravo 5 is reporting 0 casualties and requesting permission to move to Extraction Point Alpha." Granted, Rourke managed, though his attention remained fixed on the radar screen showing Valkyrie's aircraft climbing away from the battlefield. "Get me a complete battle damage assessment. I want to know exactly what we just witnessed." Specialist Rodriguez looked up from his console, his young face a mixture of awe and confusion. "Colonel, according to our sensors, she expended approximately 100 rounds total." That's incredible efficiency, sir. Most close air support missions against armor require 3 times that ammunition load for similar results." The implications of that statement hung in the air like smoke. In an era of precision-guided munitions costing hundreds of thousands of dollars each, they had just watched a pilot achieve perfect target destruction using conventional ammunition that cost a fraction of modern ordnance. But it wasn't just the economics that stunned the command staff, it was the clinical precision, the absolute confidence with which Valkyrie had engaged superior numbers while under fire. "Sir," Wu said, her fingers dancing across her keyboard as she pulled up mission data, "I'm trying to raise Valkyrie for a debrief, but she's not responding to any frequency. According to radar, she's already departed the combat zone." Before Rourke could respond, Bravo 5's radio transmission filled the bunker with voices he recognized, voices that should have been silenced forever if not for an unauthorized mission flown by a pilot operating outside every regulation in the book. "Base, this is Bravo 5 Actual," Sergeant Alvarez reported, his usually steady voice thick with emotion. "We're mobile and heading to Extraction Point Alpha. But before we clear comms, I need to say something about that pilot." A pause filled with static and the sound of soldiers moving through debris. "Sir, I've called for close air support 47 times in my career. I've worked with F-16s, F-18s, even B-1 bombers. But what we just witnessed, that wasn't just air support. That was surgical. Private Morgan's younger voice cut in, no longer tight with panic but filled with wondering gratitude. She came in so low I could see the pilot's helmet. Those tanks had us dead to rights, and she just deleted them. Like they never existed. Corporal Brooks added her perspective from the tactical level. Base, I've studied close air support doctrine at Fort Benning. What Valkyrie accomplished breaks every rule about minimum safe engagement distances and ammunition conservation. She was taking ground fire the entire time, flying through her own ricochets, and still placed every round exactly where it needed to go. Colonel Rourke found himself staring at Lieutenant Wu, searching for answers to questions he didn't even know how to ask. Lieutenant, pull up everything we have on Major Alice Walker. I want to know who just executed the most precise close air support mission I've seen in 26 years of service. Wu's expression grew troubled as she accessed personnel files. Sir, that's where things get complicated. Major Walker's file shows she's currently on administrative leave. She was suspended from active flight status 3 years ago following an incident during Operation Nightfall. Suspended? The word carried implications that made Rourke's stomach tighten. For what? Unauthorized rescue mission, sir. She violated direct orders to stand down and flew into contested airspace to extract the downed aircrew. The mission was successful. She brought back 4 pilots who were listed as probable Kia, but command determined that her actions set a dangerous precedent regarding chain of command. The bitter irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. They had just been saved by a pilot whose career had been damaged for the exact same type of unauthorized heroism they had witnessed today. So she's been grounded for 3 years? Rourke asked, though the answer was becoming clear. Then how does she maintain flight proficiency? How does she have access to an armed aircraft? Wu hesitated, scrolling through data that seemed to raise more questions than it answered. Sir, according to these records, Major Walker maintains her flight certification through civilian contract work. She's been conducting adversary training exercises with various units on an unofficial basis. As for the aircraft, she paused, checking weapon loadout reports. This is strange. The A-10 she's flying isn't on our active inventory. The tail number shows it was supposed to be transferred to the boneyard 2 years ago. The pieces of a puzzle were beginning to form, though the picture remained frustratingly incomplete. They were dealing with a pilot who operated in the shadows of military bureaucracy, maintaining combat readiness despite official sanctions, flying an aircraft that technically didn't exist, and saving lives with a precision that spoke to constant practice and unwavering dedication. Sir, Specialist Rodriguez called out, his voice urgent. I'm losing Valkyrie on radar. She's dropped below terrain masking and is heading, well, I can't tell where she's heading. It's like she just vanished. Colonel Rourke walked to the window overlooking the airfield, his eyes scanning the horizon where somewhere in the distance, an unauthorized hero was returning to whatever shadow base she called home. 12 soldiers were alive because someone had chosen to break every rule that mattered on paper while following the only rule that mattered in reality. The question now was what he intended to do about it. The silence in the command bunker stretched taut as Colonel Rourke processed what he'd just learned. A suspended pilot flying a ghost aircraft, operating outside official channels while demonstrating the kind of precision that belonged in tactical manuals. Lieutenant Wu shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she accessed files that carried classification levels requiring special clearance. Colonel, Wu began carefully, to understand Major Walker's situation, I need to brief you on Operation Nightfall. It's not a story that reflects well on command decision-making. Rourke turned from the window, his expression grim. Go on. 3 years ago, we had a joint operation in the mountains of Afghanistan. Intelligence indicated a high-value target in a remote compound, so we sent in a strike package, 2 F-16s and an F/A-18. The mission went sideways when they encountered unexpected surface-to-air missiles. All 3 aircraft took hits. The F-16s made it back to base, but the Hornet went down in hostile territory. Wu pulled up a map on her screen, marking the location with a red X. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Navy pilot, 2 kids back home. The compound was crawling with enemy fighters, and weather was deteriorating rapidly. Command made the decision to write her off as Kia and abort any rescue attempt. Too risky, they said. Too many variables. The pieces were beginning to align in Rourke's mind, forming a picture that was both admirable and troubling. But Major Walker didn't accept that decision. No sir, she didn't. Alice was flying combat air patrol that day, maintaining station about 50 kilometers from the crash site. When she heard the Mayday call and learned that command was abandoning the rescue, she made a choice that would define the rest of her career. Wu's voice took on a tone of reluctant admiration as she continued. She flew a single-ship mission into the most heavily defended airspace in the theater. No backup, no support, flying an aircraft that everyone said was too slow and vulnerable for modern combat. The A-10 took heavy damage, lost hydraulics, partial engine failure, holes in both wings, but she found Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. Found her alive? Alive but badly injured. Compound fracture in her left leg, possible concussion, and surrounded by enemy fighters who were using her as bait to draw and rescue aircraft. Any conventional rescue attempt would have been a bloodbath. Wu paused, scrolling through mission reports that painted a vivid picture of that day's chaos. But Alice didn't attempt a conventional rescue. Specialist Rodriguez, who had been listening intently, looked up from his console. What did she do? Wu's fingers found the next page of the report. She turned her A-10 into a one-aircraft siege engine. For 4 hours, she flew continuous attack runs around the compound, systematically destroying every defensive position, every vehicle, every piece of equipment the enemy could use. She didn't just suppress their fire, she eliminated their will to fight. The scope of such an operation was staggering. Rourke had conducted close air support missions, but what Wu was describing went far beyond normal tactical doctrine. 4 hours of continuous combat? How is that even possible? Because Alice Walker understands the A-10 better than any pilot in the Air Force. She knows exactly how much punishment it can take, exactly how to manage fuel and ammunition for extended operations, exactly how to use terrain and timing to maximize effectiveness while minimizing exposure. Wu's voice carried a note of professional respect that transcended rank and regulation. She made 17 separate attack runs that day, each one precisely calculated to eliminate specific threats while protecting the downed pilot. The human cost of such dedication was becoming clear. And Lieutenant Commander Mitchell? Alice landed her damaged A-10 on a road 2 kilometers from the compound, walked through enemy fire to reach the crash site, and carried Mitchell back to the aircraft. They both made it home, though Alice's A-10 was declared a total loss upon landing. The aircraft literally fell apart after touchdown. Colonel Rourke absorbed this information, understanding now why the pilot he'd just watched perform miracles operated in the shadows of military bureaucracy. So command disciplined her for saving a life. The official report commended her for heroism while simultaneously recommending suspension for violating direct orders and engaging in reckless endangerment of military assets, Wu explained, her voice heavy with the contradiction. Command's position was that allowing unauthorized rescue operations would undermine discipline and encourage other pilots to ignore orders. And Major Walker's response? Wu scrolled to the final page of the disciplinary hearing transcript. She said, and I quote, "If following orders means leaving people to die when I have the capability to save them, then I cannot follow those orders. I joined the Air Force to protect people, not to protect paperwork." The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the military held sacred about chain of command and institutional authority. Yet Rourke couldn't deny the results he'd witnessed today, 12 soldiers alive because someone chose duty over discipline. Since her suspension, Alice has maintained her flight status through civilian contracts, conducting adversary training and aircraft maintenance. She somehow acquired that A-10 through channels I can't trace, and she's been conducting unofficial rescue operations whenever she identifies situations where official channels have failed. Rourke understood now why Valkyrie had appeared today without authorization, why she'd maintained radio silence until actually engaging the enemy, and why she'd vanished immediately after completing her mission. Major Alice Walker wasn't just a suspended pilot, she was a guardian angel who operated outside the system precisely because the system had failed the people she'd sworn to protect. The question remaining was whether he would continue that failure or find a way to support someone who embodied everything the military claimed to represent. The weight of command had never felt heavier than it did in the moments following Lieutenant Wu's revelation. Colonel Rourke stood at the tactical display, staring at the coordinates where 12 soldiers had faced certain death just an hour before. The burning tank symbols had faded from the screen, but their significance remained blazed into his consciousness, a reminder that sometimes the most important victories happened outside the neat boundaries of regulation and protocol. "Sir," Wu said quietly, breaking the contemplative silence, "what do we do about Major Walker?" "Technically, she's violated about a dozen regulations today, from unauthorized takeoff to engaging targets without proper clearance." The question hung in the air like ordnance waiting to detonate. Rourke could feel the eyes of his staff upon him, waiting for a decision that would define not just Alice Walker's future, but the kind of leader he chose to be when faced with the contradiction between institutional loyalty and moral imperative. A final transmission from Bravo 5 crackled through the speakers, Sergeant Alvarez's voice carrying across the static with crystal clarity. "Base, this is Bravo 5 Actual. We've reached extraction point Alpha safely. All 12 souls accounted for, minimal injuries. We're going home because someone chose to answer our call when it mattered most." A pause filled with the sound of rotors as their helicopter arrived. "Please pass our thanks to Valkyrie. We owe her everything." The message was clear, spoken in the language that mattered most in military service: lives saved, missions accomplished, people brought home. Rourke picked up the microphone, his decision crystallizing with each word he spoke. "Bravo 5, message received and understood. Fly safe, gentlemen. Your sacrifice today won't be forgotten." He set down the microphone and turned to face his staff. "Lieutenant Wu, I want you to create a new file in our emergency response database. Call sign Valkyrie, emergency contact only, cleared for autonomous operations when official channels are unavailable or insufficient." Wu's eyes widened. "Sir, are you authorizing?" "I'm not authorizing anything officially," Rourke interrupted, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd learned to read between the lines of military necessity. "I'm simply acknowledging that sometimes our best assets operate outside standard parameters. If Major Walker chooses to respond to emergency situations using her own initiative and resources, that's her decision as a private citizen." Specialist Rodriguez looked confused. "But sir, what about the violations? The unauthorized use of military airspace?" Colonel Rourke walked to the window overlooking the airfield, where the routine business of military aviation continued undisturbed. Somewhere beyond the horizon, an aging A-10 was returning to whatever hidden base Alice Walker called home, its pilot already preparing for the next time someone would need help that official channels couldn't provide. "Rodriguez," he said without turning around, "when I was a lieutenant, my first commander told me something I've never forgotten. He said the difference between a good officer and a great one isn't following orders perfectly, it's knowing when the mission requires you to think beyond the orders." He turned back to his staff, his expression resolute. "Today, Major Walker accomplished a mission that saved 12 American lives using tactics and weapons employment that will be studied in air warfare colleges for decades. She did it without costing the taxpayers a single precision-guided munition, without risking additional aircraft, and without creating the kind of collateral damage that generates international incidents." Lieutenant Wu was typing rapidly, creating the database entry that would give Valkyrie unofficial official status. "Sir, how do we handle communications?" "She maintains radio silence during operations." "We don't handle communications," Rourke replied. "If Alice Walker chooses to monitor our frequencies and respond to emergencies, that's her prerogative. Our job is to ensure that when someone like Bravo 5 needs help and our official assets aren't available, there's still a chance that help might come." The colonel moved to his desk, pulling out a piece of official letterhead. As he wrote, his words carried the weight of institutional change implemented quietly, without fanfare or bureaucratic complexity. "I'm issuing a standing order," he announced. Any emergency situation where official air support is unavailable or delayed will be broadcast on frequency 243.0, the international emergency frequency. What happens after that broadcast is beyond our control. The message was clear to everyone in the room. They were creating a shadow protocol, an acknowledgement that the best solutions sometimes existed outside official channels. It was a calculated risk that balanced institutional integrity against operational effectiveness. 3 months later, reports began filtering through military intelligence networks of unexplained successful rescues in combat zones throughout the theater. Situations where official doctrine dictated acceptable losses somehow resulted in miraculous saves. An aging A-10 seen briefly on radar before disappearing. A call sign that appeared in radio chatter and vanished just as quickly. Colonel Rourke never officially acknowledged these reports, but he kept a detailed private log of each incident. 43 lives saved in situations where official channels had determined rescue was impossible. 0 casualties attributed to the mysterious interventions. A success rate that defied statistical analysis. The legend of Valkyrie grew quietly through the ranks, passed along in the informal networks that connected soldiers across continents in conflicts. New pilots learned that sometimes help came from unexpected directions, and that the spirit of military service transcended the boundaries of regulation and hierarchy. Major Alice Walker never returned to official duty, but she never stopped serving. Somewhere in the shadows between official acknowledgement and plausible deniability, she continued flying her impossible missions, answering calls that others couldn't or wouldn't take, proving that true military service was measured not in following orders, but in bringing people home. And in a command bunker where decisions were made daily about life and death, Colonel Thomas Rourke kept a simple notation in his personal files: sometimes the most important victories happen in the spaces between regulations. Sometimes the best soldiers are the ones who serve beyond the reach of bureaucracy. The legacy of that day lived on in 12 soldiers who went home to their families, in a commander who learned to balance protocol with pragmatism, and in a pilot who chose duty over recognition, service over status, and results over regulations. If this story of courage, duty, and unwavering dedication touched your heart, please take a moment to show your support. Hit that like and subscribe button if you believe in honoring those who serve beyond the call of duty, even when no one's watching.